Alright, so I want to clear up some confusion that I've discussed with others that kind of are in the gray of what is going on here with this Delphuino project. And I haven't touched this since the last update. It's just been pretty much exactly the same as what it is, and there isn't really much to it, just testing. But I haven't done anything since the last update at all. I haven't touched anything. So what I want to do is explain my ideas and what I'd like to do with this project. This is a PO1. This is like from 99 to 02 LS trucks, cars. It's pretty much the big ECU before they went to the P59, the 1K units. Or what are they? The 1 meg units, not 1K, 1 meg units. They were 512K in these ones. But I want to kind of just Rambletron spit out what I'm thinking of doing with this. And the first thing I should talk about is what I'd like to do is have the Arduino read the information from the PCM itself and get that going, because if you can read the information from the PCM fairly quick, you can start to manipulate what the PCM does. Now, I'm not sending program back to the PCM. I want the PCM to do exactly what the PCM is supposed to be programmed to do. That way, if you have this set up, and I'm thinking in the terms of another builder or user that's going to have one of these, and they want to take it to a dyno after they build their car, and their dyno guy or their tuner might use EFI Live or HP tuners or whatever they use to tune the car. It won't affect what is happening inside of this with an Arduino. All I want the Arduino to do is read the information of what the PCM is doing and then make changes to the outgoing items on the PCM itself. It's not actually manipulating the PCM board or anything, but using the unused pins or using the used pins, depending on what it's going out to the device controlling the engine. So the first item that I had when I wanted to read the information was I want to be able to read RPM, I want to be able to read gear, and I want to be able to read mile per hour, and I want to also be able to take control of the ignition coils. So the first thing that came to mind was, yeah, there's an RPM output on these. There's also a mile per hour output on these, and there is a gear output, kind of, depending on what the PCM does for the shift solenoids and the transmission. I'm using a 4L80 in my situation, so it'd be the A and B solenoid. And based on those, you could say, hey, one's on, one's off, both are on, both are off, kind of thing. You know what gear it's in, and you can make changes, or the Arduino can do whatever it wants based on the information. I thought it would be easier, and I don't know about data latency. Excuse me, my phone's going off. I don't know about data latency on the GM Class 2 line, which is the J1850 VPW data line that pretty much gives out everything that I need for this Arduino project to work. I don't know how the data latency will affect the controllability of like your launch control, aka like two-step, or not, basically not two-step, but launch control, because I also have a Mac valve. I'm gonna take this thing, I'm gonna slide it off after I'm done talking and explain what I have also in front of me as a test. But I'd also like these to run gauges in my Corvette, and I've already tested, and I did a small program, and everything did work until I started unplugging everything. But I made a little gauge cluster that has these 16:2 LCD screens in them for all the telemetry, and it would basically read everything off the PCM, which can also be through the J1850 protocol. And the one thing that I would have to code in there that I want that the PCM does not relay is oil temperature, oil pressure, and fuel pressure. And I have separate sensors that I can put in there. Like I have this low dollar, and I'll slide this over. I have this low dollar motorsport sensor. It's a combo sensor that does temperature and pressure. It does temperature up to like about 300 degrees, I think, and then pressure is up to 100 psi. I think it actually might be 500 degrees. Can't remember. And then I also have a pressure sensor. That's the same thing, and I have the code for it to do fuel pressure on the fuel pressure regulator. But the idea I have right now is to use the J1850 protocol, the GM Class 2, to relay the information to Arduino, and then have the Arduino do what it needs to do based on information. So example 1, two-step. What you want to do on a two-step, obviously, is set it to an RPM limit. So it's basically a rev limiter, and on that rev limiter, you want the engine to continue fueling, but you want to cut ignition. And what that fueling and unburned fuel does is ignite the turbos. In my case, twin turbo C4 Corvette. It wants to spin those turbos up. It wants to heat the RPM low, and then when you turn it off, it does full send. Turbos are fully spooled, everything like that. So what it could do is it could use that GM Class 2 signal and read the RPM signal, and if it's programmed to anything above 2000 RPM, to start cutting ignition. It sees 2000 RPM through that Class 2 line, and what it'll do is up here, these are the low reference to the ignition coil signals. So the ignition coils on these, the signals going out, the 5 volt signals to the coils, because they're like a smart coil. There's 8 of them, obviously, for each coil. And instead of it doing 8 low references back to the PCM, it does 2, and it's based on banks. So it'd be the left bank and right bank. So left bank would be cylinder 1, 3, 5, and 7, and right bank, or the driver's side bank would be 1, 3, 5, 7. The passenger side bank would be 2, 4, 6, and 8. And it would be interesting to cut not cut it, but interrupt the signal coming back on low using the Arduino through, I have relays here. The relays will probably be fast enough, but they're gonna be hard on the relay itself. The fact that it's an actual mechanical switch that's changing to turn that off and on. So I have a thing of just a random box of like transistors. I don't know if that'll do it. I might have to use a MOSFET again. I need to look more up on this stuff and figure it out, and I'm trying to throw these ideas at other people that know a lot more than I do, for them to kind of give me a little bit of a direction on this. But instead of using these relays, they'd probably work. They'd be just fine. You wouldn't want to run it for a really long time because they'd probably start to overheat. But using probably either a MOSFET or a transistor to toggle that. So when it says 2000 RPM, you would start to, when it goes over, it turns the coils, the low references off, and then you would wait like a couple milliseconds, and then you would turn them back on. That would give you to where you held a button in, you set the signal to Arduino and said, all right, two-step, you bring the engine up and it starts going boom, 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 and that would be your two-step. So that's an example for that. Another would be boost by gear, RPM, and mile per hour. And this is where I'm going to slide this stuff over just right now. So I bring this stuff back. So this little hodgepodge here is, there's no rhyme or reason to it. I was just bored and playing on a little breadboard how it would set it up on a PCB. Because eventually I would put all this stuff on a PCB and put it inside the casing. Because there's plenty of room. Everything you see here actually will fit. If I put this ECM or the PCM in here, it will fit. So doing a PCB will be a lot smaller and save a lot more room. But this obviously is a Mac valve to control vacuum, and that was what would open and close the wastegate depending on how much boost you need. And this would be nice because you could use a low spring rate in your wastegates, and based on your RPM, your speed, or your gear, depending on what you want to use, you could use that as your boost controller to what the PCM is telling the Arduino it's doing. So for me, I have a very light car. I have 2 very, very small turbos. They're not very big, but they are good for theoretically about 700 wheel, 650, 700 wheel. that's cranked fully, and it's a very light car, and even with the stock engine, you could blow the tires off of it. And so what I want to do is, in first gear, I want it to be running on spring rate, and I'd like to throw like a 4.5 pound spring in that thing. It's got an 8 pound spring right now, which is overkill for getting off the line, but it would be nice to put like a 4 pound spring in there. And with the 4 pound spring, it would just be on wastegate until you built up to like 30 mile per hour. And in first gear, it would slowly ramp in. So it'd be like, hey, you're over 30 mile per hour. I'm going to start toggling the solenoid, and I'm going to give you a little bit more boost pressure. And then when it goes into second gear, it goes, hey, you're in second gear now. I'm not going to pay attention to the mile per hour. At this point, you're in second gear. I'm going to give you this much pressure. And then when you go to third, it's going, hey, whatever you have for me for boost pressure, I'm giving you everything that you did program me to do. Or you could, I mean, it's up to whatever anybody wants to do on their build. But I'm just saying that's how I'd like to incorporate that. Again, information coming from the J1850 to the Arduino, letting the Arduino control the MAC valve. Do that. So I'm trying to explain as much as I can. The gauges and that stuff is not that hard, because the J1850 to Arduino, and then you see the Arduino to output to these 16x2 I2C board LCDs is pretty simple. I've already proven that, and I actually have my gauges actually like dummy tested to where I have everything written out, like trans temp, oil temp, oil pressure, fuel pressure, volts wouldn't be that hard. And then actually the nice thing about the P01 and P59 stuff, I don't know about the P59, it probably is the same, but the P01, I know for a fact because I had to do it on my Firebird. The fuel sender goes to the PCM. That's the way the P01s work, is it goes to the PCM and the PCM relays it to the gauges. So you can actually program that with like EFI Live or HP tuners, and then you can output it. And for me, that's really nice because I can actually just output the signal to a gauge, any kind of gauge I want, or you can output it to Arduino and do it that way too, which is very nice. It makes it very simple that the PCM can easily be able to program to read whatever the sending unit is reading for fuel level, and then make the change and do that. But I'm sorry that if I'm kind of going back and forth, or I'm not really explaining this the best I can, because I have the idea, I just need to take the time to sit down and put it forth, and I need to get the guys who do this to kind of bounce ideas off of me on how this could be done. And what I'm doing is not super not intuitive, not super like it doesn't need to be super precise, because the only thing that would probably be precise is the two-step stuff, but everything else is pretty much just sensors and data. I mean, the J1850 protocol, the class 2 to the Arduino, most of that stuff is going to the gauges, which is what you would see on an ODB2 scan gauge, or your gauges in your car. It's the same thing. So that's most of it. And then it's just using the Arduino to read the information from the PCM at a fairly quick rate, and then using the Arduino to do something outside of the PCM. What's nice is, even though it's inside the PCM case, it's not doing anything to the PCM directly. For the two-step, it would obviously be cutting the coils. I guess you could say that what's manipulating the PCM, because the PCM is telling it to do something, and the information to the smart coils is being cut by the Arduino, which is what I think like an MSD does when you plug it in. It obviously interrupts the signal to the coils, because it doesn't talk to the PCM at all. It just plugs right directly in. And then everything else is to like a MAC valve to control boost. And the fact that you can do this, I mean, it should be, you can do this. I've laid it out to say you can't, for someone to say you can't do this, is obviously they're just either don't care or they're not trying, because you're not doing a lot in terms of, like I said, you're not telling the PCM anything. You're just controlling what's going directly outside of it, using the information from the PCM, controlling what's going on outside of it. So that's why everybody keeps, when I keep talking to them about the class 2 data line, they're like, well, you need to have it relayed information. Like, I don't care. I don't know. I don't want it to talk to the PCM at all. I want it to get the information to the Arduino from the PCM, and then let the Arduino take care of it. PCM is going to run everything. The Arduino is just going to do everything outside of it. I mean, you could say manipulate the coils, but it's just going to run your gauges, and it's going to run a MAC valve. And you could do anything more than that, but what this, basically everything here to do that, you're doing a lot of what people want out of an aftermarket ECU. The only problem is like a lot, like say like a Holly system or anything else, everything is done within a GUI interface on an LCD screen. That's pretty nice. This, I don't want to get anywhere near that. If someone wants to dive into something like that, let them, because that would be great. That would be awesome to make like a touchscreen GUI interface to do quick changes on the Arduino program, because then you have a standalone ECU system on a very, very cheap and tried and true ECU that can do a lot of stuff, and that a lot of tuners can actually tune using HP tuners, and then letting the actual end user make slight changes to their boost levels, which might not be the greatest thing for the tuner because they have no control over it, but it's a very, very cheap alternative than doing aftermarket and still having something that you can do boost control, and just a standard gauge output using these cheap 16x2, or you could do even different Arduino gauges. But it is really nice that you can basically build your own gauge cluster for nothing. I was going to spend hundreds of dollars on gauges to put in this, and then all of a sudden I'm like, why don't I just put these little cheap gauges that tell me my telemetry on what's going on for a fraction of the cost? So I did. That's not the problem. It's getting this other stuff that I'd like to do and others would like to do as well, cheaply. And like I said, a tried and true ECU that just works, and then using Arduino to do stuff outside. So hopefully I explained that. I do ramble on and stuff, but if anybody has any questions, let me know. This is again just a side project. I'm not putting a lot of time into it. If I find that that one thing that just like, hey, this tool right here is gonna basically take care of all my problems, or it's gonna get me 50% of the way right away, then I will dive back into it. But everything else is basically just getting an easy way to get what I'd like to do is just using the class 2 signal to the Arduino. But if you know a better way of getting the information to the Arduino to read, let me know. I guess the fastest way for the Arduino to read the information that the PCM is outputting, let me know, because at that point then we can go on from there, because once you get the information in Arduino, then you let the Arduino take care of what it needs to. So you guys take care. Let me know if you have any questions. I will talk to you later.